I now call Des McNulty to open on behalf of the Scottish Labour Party. Mr McNulty, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Let me just state for the record that Labour fully supports Jackie Bailey's Disabled Persons Parking Bill, and we're grateful also for the cooperation that the Minister and his civil servants have provided to Jackie in taking the bill forward. I think we're all delighted that the bill has secured overwhelming support from all sides of the Chamber, which means that it will be approved this evening. The process of bringing a private member's bill to fruition is arduous. Not many members have actually achieved it, but it requires a great deal of work from the member and also from her staff. So it's entirely appropriate, as Karen Gillan did, to congratulate both Jackie and her staff on their achievement. I think it's also appropriate to thank the Non-Executive Bills Unit, the relevant committee clerks, and many others who contributed during the passage of this legislation. But the key group we need to recognise today are the disability groups and the individual people with disabilities who have campaigned over the years to have something done about the difficulties they and their families have faced in being able to use disabled parking bays. It was the groups and individuals who identified a series of problems which they had experienced at first hand, including the misuse of advisory parking bays outside residential property by people who have no right to use them, the lack of disabled bays in many locations, including shopping centres and workplaces, the unsuitability of some bays in terms of size for people who need equipment such as wheelchairs to allow them to get about, and the lack of enforcement, even in circumstances where bays are statutory rather than advisory. Jackie Bailey was able to marshal the information provided by groups and individuals based on their direct experience into an overwhelming case for change, which she was able to set out not just in the consultation exercise, which was thorough before the bill was launched, but also in her contributions at various stages of its passage. Because the Blue Badge Scheme and traffic regulation are both reserved matters, the approach taken has had to be focused on placing duties on local authorities rather than on the police. But the outcome is a package of measures that should make a significant difference in terms of supporting the mobility of people with disabilities. As a result of a very successful postcard campaign, 17,000 replies is not just a huge amount of work for Jackie's staff, but a very significant achievement in carrying this campaign forward. Every MSP has been made aware of the issues addressed by the bill and of the strong level of support for it from their disabled constituents in particular. The number of postcards I received may have been influenced by the fact that I represent the neighbouring constituency to Jackie, and there was considerable local publicity for her efforts. But I think the responses came from all over Scotland. Many colleagues in different parts of Scotland were contacted by numbers of constituents keen to emphasise that the problems this bill addresses require to be tackled and that thousands of disabled people across Scotland will be helped once this bill is approved. At stage one, David McNulty said that if common courtesy, respect and sensitivity to people's needs were more prevalent in society, we would not need laws to enforce disabled parking bays or spaces, and social norms and peer pressure would combine to ensure that disabled parking facilities were not abused. Regrettably, moral pressure to be a good citizen has not worked as well as it should, and we need to take steps on behalf of disabled people to ensure that their rights as citizens, rights of access to shops and workplaces, rights to conveniently drive to and from their own homes without undue inconvenience, are protected. Now, there are concerns about costs, which certainly as a former convener of the Finance Committee, I'm clear should never be forgotten about. It is concerning that there was so much variation in the estimated costs. Now, while we have more information now than is available at stage one, the range of estimates is still uncomfortably wide. We've already heard from Karen Gillan and from the Minister, as well as from local government on this subject, and I hope the range of cost estimates will be significantly reduced as implementation is taken forward. I'm reminded, however, of comment made to me by one of my constituents, Jackie Masira. Jackie has been a wheelchair user for most of his life, but his determination to lead a normal life despite his disability is deeply impressive. He said that dealing with his disability was partly a matter of overcoming the physical limitations he has to contend with, but it's also a matter of dealing with the behaviour of other people where they thoughtlessly or sometimes deliberately make things more difficult for him as a disabled person. He's learned to live with his disability, recognising that it's permanent, but it disappoints him when people make it more difficult for him to overcome the consequences of his disability when it would just be as easy for them to be considerate. A non-disabled person using a marked parking space outside the home of a disabled person, or the failure to provide for disabled people to go to the shops, the cinema, or to use any other public facility by making enforced spaces available, is something I believe we need to address in order for us to be sure that we are being fully inclusive. People like Jackie Masira have overcome many of the barriers consequent on his disability, but we in this Parliament can help him and people like him by approving this legislation. Ultimately, the test of this legislation is whether we should do the right thing by some of the most vulnerable people in society, whether we can do something which will improve their lives and which will assist them in making their individual contribution in whatever sphere they choose. It's clear that restrictions on mobility exist because of the abuses referred to in the consultation and the committee evidence, that these can be reduced by more effective enforcement and by a more responsible approach by non-disabled drivers and by local authorities, and there is a need for this legislation to secure these improvements. On this basis, Labour supports the passage of this legislation, and we look forward to seeing it approved at decision time later today. Thank you.